You know what it's time to talk about, everybody? You know what it's time to discuss? It's time to discuss the real issues, okay? Trans people in drag shows. This is the real issue gripping America. Look, okay? I know a lot of you are here just for the Ukraine coverage. My dedicated fans are basically all in the... Actually, a few of my fans are actually in the trenches of the actual war, which is pretty crazy to think. But we also have other issues that I want to talk about. And I've been watching this from a distance for a while, okay? I've been watching this from a distance, seeing as Pride Month has been absolutely awful. This has been one of the most vitriolic Pride Months that I've seen from a distance in forever. And I didn't get to talk about really any of it because I was in Zaporozhye covering the war. My God, guys, this is extremely disappointing. Could you stop the video clip? No, it's fine. Who cares? So, I want to talk about what Pride Month has been, which has been a mess. It has been a absolute mess. So, on June 1st, it was the start of Pride Month. And a few days into Pride Month, there was the hosting of an event. And it was a drag queen kind of performance for children that parents could bring their children to. Which, for me, that's actually what I've always preferred. Not bringing children specifically to drag shows, but the idea that hey, there are certain events that may be more child appropriate and certain events that are not child appropriate. Advertise them correctly so you know which ones you can bring your children to and which ones you can't bring your children to. Good consumer advocacy, right? If you are not comfortable with bringing your child to an event, like a normal Pride event, which has possibly some men in scantily clad outfits or women in scantily clad outfits, okay, have a separate event which you think will be more child centered and family friendly. That's always what I have thought was a good idea, not to shut down people from expressing themselves in queer ways, their sexuality, but making spaces where it might be more family friendly and it might be easier. I always thought that was the solution. Don't shut down events, make your own, right? Simple. So this event garnered a lot of attention for a few reasons. Number one, I think people think of drag queens in a very certain way, in a very they are inherently sexual. So the idea of a child going to a drag queen show or a child-centered drag queen show is very silly to them, or it feels impossible to comprehend. There was a second thing, and it is, I'm going to be honest, that sign in the background, I don't know if you can see it, but the sign says it's not going to lick itself. And I gotta say, in the context of a child center event, it doesn't really come off well, to put it gently. It's terrible optics, to say the least. Now, I've been told that it's actually an ice cream reference, but I think they should have taken down the sign. Okay, I'm gonna be for real with you. Okay, I think they could have taken down the sign. I think it's an ice cream thing. I think it's just kind of these two forces kind of met at the wrong place at the wrong time to make it look a lot more suggestive than it actually was. They were not putting that up there as to direct towards the kids in some sexual innuendo. It was in reference to the ice cream, which I think is understandable. But obviously, it looks a certain way. It looks suggestive in a separate context, which was of the show. And the third thing that people got upset by this by a bunch of things, but I'm just trying to limit it because there's so much to cover. The third thing was them handing dollar bills. And so to give you guys an idea of, I found what I could say was maybe the most, I guess you could say, quote unquote, objectionable clip that people were sending to me. They're saying, this is a moment that you just can't defend, Dylan. And so we'll watch that quick and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so this is probably the most possibly suggestive clips out of the whole event. The rest of it, I'm gonna be honest, was just really tame. This is probably the most movement in that fashion that we saw at the event. So the first thing I want to comment on is I already talked about the sign. I don't think it was purposeful. I think it was specifically due to the fact that they serve ice cream and it was just wrong place, wrong time. Second thing, the dollar bills being handed to them. A lot of people are trying to say that's like they're strippers when you hand them dollar bills. Personally, I always looked at drag queens, and this is always how they were referred to me, as performers, right? And when you look at street performers or performers of this context, you usually tip them for their work, right? When I was a little kid, we would see people playing like the harmonica at the dock in Ocean City, Maryland, or we'd see some like contortionist or like some like I don't know, puppeteer or artist, and my grandmother would hand me a dollar bill and I'd go up to their little bucket, like I'd shuffle over in my tiny little sneakers and I'd put the dollar bill in the bucket. They'd look at me, they'd smile because like, oh, and I walk away, right? You're kind of teaching people to like pay people for their you're teaching kids to like pay people for their services. You pay performers. These people are doing kind of like a cultural service in a way, therefore you pay them. I didn't see it as a sexual stripper thing. If it was, I think the dollar bills would be placed in different ways. You know, when I think of a strip club, don't you put them in like the drop? That's how I always interpreted it. In fact, if you listen to most people talk about drag queens, they'll call them performers. They don't call them like, so our strippers or our prostitutes or our etc. or our sex workers. That's not how they're referred to in at least these types of shows. And talking about the last thing, and this is the thing I want to say lastly about the idea of just inherently a child at a drag event. So drag is a very broad category. Jafar 505, you're crazy. You don't believe in anything. My goodness. Thank you, Jafar, for the comments here. I appreciate it. But the last thing I want to comment is like this idea that it is a drag event, therefore children should not attend. Drag is an extremely broad category. There are absolutely sexual drag events, which have sexuality front and center, and they're meant for adults. And you should not, under any circumstances, bring a child to a sexual drag event, right? That's my position. If you disagree with it, tough, right? But that doesn't cover the full spectrum of drag. There is also drag that is meant to lean into fashion. There is drag that's meant to lean into performance in a way, like performance, either like singing or some talent, kind of like a talent show. In fact, I think a lot of drag performances just end up looking like talent shows. Then there's drag that's meant to lean into comedy. And so if I see a drag show that involves just dancing and comedy, etc., I don't understand how that, as long as they're not, you know, too sexually charged or there's some sex act done on stage, I don't see the problem with allowing child who are appropriate for whatever level of humor is being showed, age appropriate, maybe 12, 13, whatever, depending on the level of humor, however, whatever it's like, to be able to go to these events. It's a broad spectrum. It'd be like me saying, like, we need to stop kids from going to comedy shows. Well, comedy covers a lot. Comedy covers, you know, really raunchy stuff, and comedy can cover the most light stuff. We're saying we shouldn't take kids to music performances, like concerts. Some concerts you absolutely shouldn't take children to. They're full of ecstasy, LSD, shrooms, and coke, or it's extremely sexual, or the lyrics are very explicit. But there's other concerts, like I'd take a kid to a Billy Joel concert. I'd take a kid to a Metallica concert, even though sometimes that can even get explicit. Metallica. Same thing with the Rolling Stones. That can get pretty explicit too. And not only when it comes to the sexual side, but a lot of songs talk about like war and death and drug use, right? And so ultimately it's your job as a parent to like determine like what level of, you know, explicit natures, like whether it be drugs, violence, sexuality, your minor, as in a child to teen, etc., should be exposed to based upon their individual maturity level, because different kids, have different maturity levels. That's really it. So, I mean, I think we should treat drag shows just like we treat concerts, or treat drag shows just how we treat comedy acts, or treat drag shows just like how we treat movies. You take your children to the versions of that are age appropriate for them. A great example of this would be Drag Queen Story Hour. Drag Queen Story Hour is actually, in my opinion, and I'm going to be for real, I don't care if this gets me heat. I was talking to the mayor of my city about organizing one in my city. And now I am actually more determined to do that. I want to do it now. These events, to me, are completely age appropriate. They're not hurting anybody. It's just people reading books to kids in fanciful outfits. Who does this hurt? This doesn't hurt anybody. They're just reading a story. But they read it in a fanciful outfit. In an outfit that usually doesn't match male or female, whatever gender they are, their usual expected societal gender expression. But I don't think having a non-societally standard form of gender expression, I don't think that is inherently A, sexual, or B, not appropriate for children. Because you're just wearing different types of clothes or expressing yourself in a different manner. There's nothing inappropriate about expressing yourself non-traditionally when it comes to gender. If I ended up putting bows and flowers in my hair or wearing lipstick, all of a sudden now I can't be seen in front of the kids? What changed? How is that going to hurt the children? Is it going to scar them? Is it going to make them gay? Is it going to make them trans? Is it going to make them decadent? No, of course not. And if you genuinely believe it is, then your child's weak. And I mean that in like they have a weak will and there's nothing you can do about it. Your child's doomed if it takes just a simple, like a bow or some lipstick being seen on a man to make them go, okay, I'm gay now. Okay, I'm trans now. There was nothing you could do. You think you could protect them from the concept of lipstick, from the concept of a dress, from the concept of a skirt, from the concept of non-gender conforming gender expression? No, of course not. You couldn't. Eventually, they're going to see it, whether you like it or not. And the idea that a 5-year-old seeing a man in a skirt or a man with lipstick or a man dressed like this, that's going to make them trans or it's going to make them gay, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And if it is, then there's nothing you can do. That's not the case, but if it is, it's like what are you going to do? You're going to make your kid live in a box? You don't shelter your children. That's what that would be to me. You're sheltering your children out of some fear, some like really some misaligned fear that this is going to change them in some unconceivable way that's going to permanently change their sexuality. It isn't. You can't shelter them. The best thing you can do here is just kind of like explain to them if they have questions, like exactly what's happening here. There's nothing non-age appropriate about this. Just like there's nothing non-age appropriate about somebody dressed as Cinderella going to a classroom and reading them a book about Cinderella. Or somebody dressed as a pirate coming here and reading the kids a story about pirates. If you really think your kids... Okay, here's my hot take. If you're really interested in protecting children from corrupting influences, your main opponent should not be random storybook readings across the country. It should be the YouTube Kids algorithm. My God, that is a disaster. That is a corrupting influence on children. That is going to destroy a generation. because they got some wild stuff on there that no one, including children, should be seeing, that is just being put on autoplay because you're not supervising your children like a proper adult. And you want to go and do mommy wants drinky instead of making sure your kids are watching proper television appropriate for their age, and instead they're watching Spider-Man spank Elsa, okay? That's the real corrupting influence on children, for real. For real. I know a lot of you in my chat have fallen asleep watching YouTube videos because you're all online neats, right? And you wake up and the videos you're on is not at all what you were watching. Now think if you're a child and you experience that with something else, right? You just let the auto algorithm play. And it's going to be like, there's going to be these like the thing is, there's people like prey on the kids too. They like will specifically try to design their videos to be as shocking as possible for children in order to grab them, pull them in, make money, turn their minds in the goop, man. Like there's zero redeeming quality to a lot of this content. Discord is even worth so much fucking grooming on that platform. That's the thing. That I feel like people, like this is the more visible like representation of queerness, and queerness is non-traditional, therefore it's scary, and that's why they're angry at this, but they're not going to be angry at the YouTube algorithm, which is something that can actually, in my opinion, like just fill your kids' heads with trash. Or they're not going to be angry at, say, Hooters, when there's like children dressing as Hooters girls, little girls dressing as Hooters girls and going to Hooters, or people bringing their kids to Hooters. Can I tell you, here's an experience I had. I was, I think, 15 or 16, and I was, for my birthday, almost, I would say basically forced to like go to like the Tilted Kilt. And I've talked about this on stream before. The Tilted Kilt, let me look it up quick for you guys, is like I don't know how to describe it besides it's a titty bar. Like, let me just be blunt about it, okay? The Tilted Kilt. It's a restaurant. Yeah, that's sure. That is something, right? And there was one in like around Hagerstown. And so this is how they dress their waitresses, right? And so I remember like my family member brings me there for my birthday. I turned 16. And I find out where we're going, and I'm like, oh, dude, I don't want to go in. I don't want to do that. I expressed, like, I'm not comfortable doing this. I think the exact words I used was, I'm not comfortable going into this location. Because I felt weird. I didn't want to have the artificial niceness. I didn't feel comfortable in the environment because of, like, there's a lot of creepy guys there. I wasn't that, I'm going to be blunt, I wasn't interested in women of this nature. Like, this doesn't get me in any way. I don't, like, if I'm there, I'm embarrassed, not because, oh, wow, what pretty women. I'm embarrassed because it's like, oh, God, this is so creepy. I don't like this. And I expressed that. And there were men going into the Tilted Kilt. Many men who I assume would also be very angry about Drag Queen Story Hour and drag queens being around children. They get around me. They surround me. I'm not kidding. They surround me and they start being like, come on, come on. I got a bunch of men in 50s and 60s surrounding me, a minor. Being like, come on, get in there, go in there. The women will love you. Oh, you're a lady killer. And I'm just standing there like, these people are basically like forcing me to go into a very like sexually perverse environment where women are scantily clad in order to be there for you to ogle at. That's the purpose of these environments. And I felt extremely comfortable. That is a lot closer to grooming, in my opinion, than you bringing somebody to Drag Queen Story Hour to have them read a book because the man there is in a dress. At least in my opinion. And so if somebody wanted to say, like really wanted to approach this issue correctly, I would say this is something that should be approached on a societal level of like just the sexualization of children, period. But the reason that the queer aspect gets hit so much is A, non-traditional gender like expression is the most targeted. Because it makes people uncomfortable because they're not used to it. And so it's easy to demonize, easy to go after. That's the first reason. And the second reason is like queer sexuality is easier to scare you with than traditional sexuality. It's not as as creepy for people to hear, to like put kids in shirts talking about how they're going to be a lady killer or bringing them to Hooters and stuff. It's not as creepy to the average person because that type of sexuality is more accepted than queer sexuality. If you did the same thing at a sexual drag queen show, it's going to get a lot more outrage because it's just queer, and it's easier to be scared of it because it's queer, and it makes you more uncomfortable because you're not used to it. But two wrongs don't make a right. Exactly. And I'm not for bringing kids to any show that is sexual in nature, right? Once you get a kid gets to like 15, 16, 17, or like 14, you want to take them to like a concert where they use the F word or something, like, okay, whatever, right? It's up to you to make a determination about your child and how mature they are at their age, okay? This is why I don't want like the government generally saying the kids can't go to this concert, kids can go to this concert. I find it a little silly, right? But I don't think that non-traditional gender expression as a concept, as an entertainment form, is inherently predatory towards children or inherently sexual. Therefore, that's why I'm fine with things like Drag Queen Story Hour, because there's nothing sexual about it whatsoever. There's nothing non-age appropriate about it. The children aren't being hurt. The only thing they're being introduced to at that age is drag performance, the existence of drag, and a non-traditional form of gender expression, which I don't think is not age appropriate. Okay, I've said my position. Now that I've said my position, and I've said it at length, let's talk about what other people think about the matter. Because not everybody seems to agree with my brilliant opinions, okay? So let's see how people reacted to this. Well, this person decided, he is a Texas state representative. He decided that he was going to propose a ban on taking your children to any drag show. This means like Drag Queen Story Hour, any drag performance, banning it. Not only banning you from doing it, but making it a felony for child, like basically saying you're endangering your child, making a felony to take your child to one of these events, and it will strip you of your parental rights. Meaning that if you took your kid, if you took your kid to Drag Queen Story Hour in the state of Texas, not only would you be charged with a felony, but you then go on to lose your parental rights. There was a quicker response in Texas to kids seeing some drag than there was to kids getting shot up in an elementary school, 19 getting shot up and killed. That is so bizarre to me. Now, I hope this won't get passed. I have no clue if it will. But it really makes me feel like strange when it comes to like whether or not these people care about the children. Because I don't believe that none of them care about kids. I actually believe a significant amount of these people do genuinely care about children, but they're just scared of what they don't understand, you know? Not this guy. I think this guy's a scumbag. I think a lot of them just don't understand queerness or non-traditional gender expression, and therefore they see a child around non-traditional gender expression, or they see one example, a cherry-picked example, and then they get into a fervor, and then they want to jump on this bandwagon because they don't know what's going to happen to their kids. When my grandmother made me uninstall Slenderman after the Slenderman killings, that wasn't because she hated indie game developers. It was because she was scared about what she didn't understand. And these legislators are taking advantage of people's lack of knowledge or people's innate fears at what they don't understand, and they're weaponizing it for political gain when they should be working to stop other kids getting shot up in schools, stop other kids getting blown away in class. And that what gets me is if your main issue is protecting the children as a legislator or as an activist, you should, in Texas, absolutely, specifically in Texas, you should be trying to figure out what we do in the fallout of Uvalde, not what we do about this one drag show that happened in Texas.